And now let's create the middleware and a function to handle all these errors that we're going to be encountering and some custom errors that we could create. So what we're going to do is we're first of all going to go to the index.js file, and over here what we want to do is we want to basically create a middleware function right here. So on the bottom where you could see app.get, you want to create app.use, and what you would do is you would say, just let me type use properly, and in here what you want to do is you want to put in error, which is you're basically gonna get from the input, right? User input, request coming from the user, response coming from the server, and then the next is the next middleware function. So basically not a function, but the next response that is gonna come from the middleware. So what we want here is we basically want a const, and we essentially want a status code, and we want to make it either the error.status code, whatever the default status code was brought by the error, or if it doesn't have any status code, we could just give it as a 500 internal server error. There's going to be a const error message as well, so we're going to be calling it as error.message, or if it's not, we'll just say internal server error. So we could just say internal server, and then we have error. Okay, same thing goes for the next one, which is basically response.status. So what we give is the same status code that we created. So status code goes in here, and we basically throw out a JSON response, and inside here we have an object. Now the object contains 3 different parameters. One, we have the success. Now this is not going to be successful because it's an error, so we say success : false. Okay, and the same goes for the status code. We pass in the status code here, status code, and the last one, which is this message, so we just pass in the message. Great. So now we have all of these 3 parameters. What we want to do is we also just have these semicolon here, and this is pretty much it. So this is your function you have created. What you want to do is you want to go to the auth.controller.js, and you want to accept. You can see this async request response, and you just need to have next here. Now remember that we created this sign up and async function, and then it goes all the way to this bottom, where you could see that it catches this return response status 500, right? Message, error message. So instead of having this created by yourself, let's just have next handling the error. So this is basically gonna handle it without us having it involved. So that's perfect. And similar to that, it would work, and everything seems to be fine. But what about some other errors, like suppose this one? Now let me just test this out first of all with the Thunder client. So I'm going to go here, I'm going to make a new request. My initial request was this one, so I'm going to try to create the sign up API again with the same username and parameter. Okay, so I believe everything is on. Yes, everything is on, and let me just try to send it. Now you can see I get a very useful message that says, remember those input fields that we gave false of the success, status code is 500, and they also told us a message right here, which is really good. I mean, you want a nice response so that the client could get something. Now what we want to do is, with this particular case, what we want to do is we want to also create a function. And I'll tell you what's the use case for that. So inside the server folder, let's just collapse everything, and then in the server folder we have created another folder actually, and this is going to be called utils. And inside this utils folder we're going to create a file which is going to be called error.js. Okay, and in this error.js we're going to create a custom function which is going to be called export const error handler, and it's going to be used for custom errors. Now by general, some are like 500, like they're specifically default errors, but some we could create ourselves. Like this is not an error actually, we just created an error by ourselves. Like we said, if there's no username or email or password, or even if the username is blank or the email is blank or the password is blank, we created this ourselves, and we said all fields are required, right? Response.status 400 client error, but we want to create it ourselves, so we could create this function for handling this particular case. You could just basically say you pass in the status code, which is the status code, and the status message, right? So like here, and you could basically go, and in here what you want to do is you want to first of all create the error. So you could say const error, and JavaScript provides a new a really nice constructor that is just called error. Okay, and it basically creates the error. You could now pass in the error.status code. Okay, so status code, and then you could essentially make that status code what you passed in as the status code. Similar to that, you could make the message. So error.message, you could make that to the message. So let me just quickly have that message here as well. And the same goes for the last step. And the last step is just returning the error. So we just return the error like that. Great, we got the error message right now, and we just want to basically use this here. So to use this particular error message, you want to have to first of all import it. So you go back to your auth.controller.js, and remember where you basically have this, you just remove this line, okay? And you could just say next. So essentially we have the next, right? So next, and then over here we'll have error handler. So this is our function, error handler. Now error handler is not defined right now. We have to import it. So 400 will be the status code, and we have all input is required. Okay, or all fields are required. And okay, so now we could have the semicolon here, and this is not imported, so you could just say control space and import it from here. So you could say error handler is coming from utils error.js. Now this is gonna work perfectly fine. And if we basically test it out with a Thunder client, you'll see that it's, you know, essentially going to work. So right now we have, suppose this as empty. So we have, right now I just basically said username like that. And you can see over here, all fields are required, which is, you know, I'm giving username nothing. So if I even remove username, it still gives me that all input are required, which is perfect. I mean, my code is working. And when I do this, of course, I'm not going to get an error because this is something similar, and I need to have a unique. And when I create a unique one, suppose 1, 2, 3, and then we have 1, 2, 3, and then 1, 2, 3. Now it's going to be successfully created. Awesome. That's just perfect. And now we can move on to the next step.